It is a truth universally acknowledged that the book will be better than the movie. Hi and hello, it's Kristin from Kristin and Her Books. I'm glad you're here. Today I'm going to be telling you some of the major differences between the Little Women movie and the old classic Little Women book. There's not too many because, to be quite frank with you, this production of Little Women was actually pretty spot on in concern to the events of the story that actually took place, but the big differences lay kind of more in how the events unfolded and some subtleties that you may have missed. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into them. Some of the big difference that I'm going to be talking about are linear telling of the story, as well as the character of Jo and how she was portrayed more like Louisa May Alcott than as Jo in the book. And finally, I will rant a little bit on poor Mr. Bhaer. So I'll timestamp those so you can find the exact one that you're looking for, but let's go ahead and jump right in. And to begin, we are going to talk about the linear telling of this book. So when a story is told from beginning to end without flashbacks, it's linear. This is actually non-linear narrative. In the Little Women movie, the events that occur are the sisters being adults, and then there are flashbacks to their childhood. But in the Little Women book, the story is completely linear, following them as they grow up with no flashbacks. And while this isn't a ginormous difference, I find that it affected the telling of the story in the movie in a very profound way. The movie kind of felt like it was more for an adult audience. With the sisters being older, it's like it lost some of that childish whimsy that I tend to relate to the Little Women story. It still had it in the flashback moments, but really the story was more focused on the girls being grown. And while I loved that element too, I mean, it was much more relatable for me as a 23-year-old to see Jo and Amy be grown. It's not exactly what I think of when I think of Little Women. It's those childhood stories, and then the grown-up part is just a little bit of it. So that was one of the differences. Another way that telling the story out of like a linear fashion really affected it was the fact that in the beginning of the movie, you see Amy and Laurie already having a bit of a relationship. So if you didn't know the book and the story behind Jo and Laurie, then you would not root for Jo and Laurie in the same way that you do in the book. Because in the book, Jo and Laurie's friendship happens way before Laurie and Amy become a thing. It makes you want to root for them, even though you know that they're not well suited for each other. But in the movie, you already see Amy with Laurie before he even encounters Jo. And I feel like that did something really well in not villainizing Amy. In almost any reproduction of Little Women, I think that Amy has been villainized because she's the one who took Laurie away or something, the one who's always causing bad things to happen to our Jo. But she's not a villain. She just ended up falling in love with Laurie, and I think that this new movie really portrayed that very well. I think that this new movie made Amy even more of a prominent character than Meg, to be honest, which is a new twist on how the sisters are usually portrayed. Okay, moving on to the next difference between the new Little Women's movie and the old Little Women's book, and that is the portrayal of Jo. So, not sure why, but this story kind of played around with portraying Jo as if she were Louisa May Alcott. For example, in the beginning of this, we see Little Women, the book, and the author's name is Louisa May Alcott. Underneath the title, it's very clear. And then at the end of the movie, we see the book again, Little Women, only this time the author's name is Jo. So, really clearly connecting Louisa May Alcott with Jo. And while I think that they do have some parallels in their lives, I would say that Louisa May Alcott does not make the claim at any point within the story that she is Jo. So I find that interesting. I mean, but who are we kidding, right? Like, writers do put themselves into stories, so I'm not mad about the comparison. I just find it interesting. All right, and lastly, let us talk about my dear Mr. Bhaer. I love Mr. Bhaer, and I think that his treatment in the Little Women movie is unfair. He's basically kind of treated as a laughable afterthought type of character, and even the whole idea of whether he ends up with Jo or not is actually questioned in the movie. Like, you could kind of interpret the ending in two different ways, which I won't go into, but there is a Slate article that I will link either up here or below that you can check out that debates the endings with Mr. Bhaer. But in the Little Women book, Mr. Bhaer is a viable romantic option for Jo. He does criticize her books mainly for them being sensationalist, but she is also portrayed as being drawn to him and having a true connection to him. So in the Little Women movie, whenever there's that scene ending and she's talking to her editor or something and he's like, oh, but it needs romance, then there's this very cheesy, like old school rom-com type of vibe where the characters kiss in the rain and Jo ends up with Mr. Bhaer in that way, and it just makes it seem like it wasn't supposed to happen, or it's cheesy and silly. And while I don't think that Jo needed a Mr. Bhaer, I think that in the book it is just something that happens to her, and it does raise an interesting question, like, did women authors feel like every main character needed to end up with a spouse, like to have some kind of thing happen with a man for it to be a true and fulfilling story? I think that Little Women probably would have been fine without Mr. Bhaer. That being said, I love his old stuffy professor vibes and how he just kind of wins Jo's heart with his ardent affection and honest criticism. I don't know. That's just my opinion on it. Alright, so those are some of the biggest differences between the new Little Women movie and the old Little Women book. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button in the comments below. Let me know what you thought about the new Little Women movie if you saw it, or if you haven't yet, let me know if you're going to see it. And also, I want to give a new subscriber shout out to Nicole Fody. Thank you for subscribing, Nicole. I hope you liked this video. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks for stopping by. Bye.